Hello everyone, my name is Stanley St. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about Declaration of Sentiments and Resolution. But before I go into the summary and analysis of this work, here's what you're going to do for me. You're going to like the video, subscribe, and comment. If you can, that will help the channel grow. I'm going to summarize and analyze. You are going to subscribe and like. That's the plan. So let's start talking about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and this work. Basically, what happens in Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions, we get the Declaration of Independence, but it's a modified version. In this work, Stanton basically represents women. She was born in the 19th century, in 1815, and Stanton was born in America where women didn't have rights. Women couldn't go to school. Women couldn't work like men. Women didn't have access to businesses, to be business owner, to be property owners, to exist as a citizen. Women didn't even have the right to vote and the right to be in politics. Within America, within the 19th century, the only individuals who had rights, who were full citizens, who could do or who had access to the entire country were white men. If you were a white woman, if you were black, if you were in a minority group, you just didn't have full rights that the full rights that you should have as an American citizen. So, throughout the course of American history, African Americans had to fight for their rights. Women of all kinds, white, black, every ethnicity, every race, every type of individual or type of person in American history, they've had to fight for their rights. And this Elizabeth Stanton is talking about how white women, or just women in general, fought for their rights to count in this country and to be full citizens, because women weren't full citizens in America. And so Stanton, she starts off this work. She's talking about the Declaration of Independence. The original, or the Declaration of Independence we have, it mentions man, it mentions men. It doesn't have the word woman in it. It just says man. And in this version, in Stanton's version, she talks about women having rights. She says, all men and women are created equal. And she lines up, she creates an argument, she builds an argument throughout this essay where she talks about how, in the 19th century, women just didn't have rights. If your husband was abusive, if your husband was raping you, if your husband could do whatever he wants to you, because women didn't have rights. I mean, it's until the 20th century that rape in a marriage was starting to become recognized. Before then, when America was just a party country where everybody and anybody was drinking, because in the 19th century, America was just a crazy place. People were drinking. There were no laws in regards to alcohol. People were drinking pure alcohol. People were dying young, partying, living life, and big business didn't exist. There was land everywhere. There was opportunity in every corner. Men had rights. White men had rights. No one else had rights. And women suffered. Women suffered. And you had a lot of that's one of the reasons why prohibition took place and the temperance movement took place, was because women didn't have rights. They were being beaten left and right within the 19th century. Life wasn't good for them. Life wasn't perfect for them. The laws and the numerous amount of laws that we have today that protects girls and women, they just didn't exist. And so Stanton says within this essay that, women don't have rights. This is within the 19th century. They don't have rights. They can't get an education. If they get married, they basically don't exist in the eyes of the law, because if you're a woman, you're just the property of your husband. You are the property of your husband. What he says goes. If he dies, the property gets taken away. You don't get to keep it. It most likely will go to your husband's son. And if he doesn't have a son, pretty much would be taken away from you, because women couldn't own property, women couldn't own businesses, women couldn't vote, women couldn't go to school. Most colleges, most Ivy League schools within the United States, they didn't accept women in their beginning. They didn't accept women as students, as workers, as anything. It was just a man's world. And, Stanton and other women like herself who fought for women's suffrage, who fought for the development of women's rights within America, they won. We have the 19th Amendment. Women have the right to vote. Women, have full rights as citizens today. They can own businesses. They can own property. They can be their own individuals. But back then, in order for a woman to be recognized, in order for a woman to be anything, she would have to get married. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts. You had to get married. And if you never got married, life was pretty much horrific for you, because your wages were, you couldn't argue about your wage or what you got paid. If you got a job somewhere, you would have to settle with what they give you, because in the courts, you didn't have any rights, right? If you had a husband, sure, your husband could protect you, but if you didn't have a husband, life is horrible for you. So that's one of the reasons why marriage was pretty much in of a way stable within the 19th century, because women had to cling on to a man, had to cling on to a husband to survive, to exist. And pretty much Stanton even says that, women had to be dependent on their husbands, dependent on their fathers. You're raised by your father, and then your husband pretty much carries you your entire life, and you had no other options. So it's very significant how she rewrites the Declaration of Independence. She, talks about how women's equality within the United States, the right for women, human rights, citizen, their rights as a citizen, of citizens of the United States. She writes about all of that, and she makes a very compelling argument. And we know that through her actual life, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she fought for women's suffrage. She fought for women to be considered as regular citizens, to be equals as men in this country. In terms of analysis, in terms of a deeper meaning here, you have to look at the structure of this work, how it's written. Stanton is taking a piece of of American history, a piece of our culture. She's taking the Declaration of Independence, which is a very important work, rewriting it, adding her views on it. She, pretty much includes women, and I feel like this is the American way. This is how Americans have always done this. Slavery in America, black people in America, they had to add themselves to the Declaration of Independence. They had to change the laws. They had to change the way that American functions. Women of all kinds, white, black, any types of minorities, they had to come into this country and rewrite the laws and fight within politics. And change the laws. Every minority group, every group that has existed in the United States, in order to be considered as full citizens, in order to be considered as full individuals, as full human beings, you have to fight for it, you have to struggle for it, and oftentimes you always win. We see the same thing with the civil rights movement. We see the same thing with the women's suffrage movement. The 20th century was a very interesting time. A lot of things changed within the 20th century. I'm talking about civil rights. I'm talking about women's suffrage. I'm talking about child rights, and so on and so forth. So the 19th century was horrible. If you want to know more about the 19th century and just get a better understanding of what was going on in the 19th century and how horrible it was for minorities, black people, just everyone in general, because there wasn't even clean drinking water within the 19th century in America. People were dying left and right, drinking alcohol, beating people, killing people. There were no laws. There were laws, but not many people were following them in the 19th century. It was a crazy time. Only when we get into the 20th century, we start to see civil rights, we start to see women's suffrage, and we start to see Stanton and other women get into politics, get into legislation, get into being full human beings, and their work being fulfilled. So that's what the work is about. In terms of analysis, in terms of a deeper meaning here, it's pretty much, again, you're looking at the structure, you're looking of what's being achieved, you're looking how Stanton is talking to the audience, because this essay is kind of written, directed towards legislators, it's directed towards the people. It's saying, here's what we've been wronged. We're supposed to be free, we're supposed to be equal, we're supposed to have rights, but we don't. So Stanton is writing to Congress. It's this. I'm getting this from my perspective, from how it sounds like she's writing, like, to say the injustice. This is the injustice that's happening to women. This is what's been taken away from us. We should fight for this. And so she has a very powerful voice in this essay, because she's using an important document and changing the words of an important document to get her point across. And she really does a good job of convincing you, a great job of convincing you of what's right and what should change. So, you see within this essay, you see the suffering that women have gone through within the 19th century. You see what needs to be changed, and you see who she's talking to, and from the perspective she's coming from. So that's my perspective. I mean, there's always much more to these essays. This is just a summary to get you going, to get you to see what's just going on in this work. That's my perspective on it. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, and or comment, and I'll see you guys in my next video.